Today we're going to disassemble a Droid Incredible 3, also known as the Droid 4G. The difficulty on this one is relatively low, not too tough to do yourself, as long as you buy the entire front piece, which is how we're going to do this one. You can see that this screen is pretty badly cracked. What we're going to do is begin by prying under the tab at the bottom of the battery panel to take that away from the phone. Remove your battery and make sure that you also remove your microSD and your SIM card, or excuse me, your 4G LTE SIM card before you proceed. And the microSD actually ejects. This one you can pull out. The other one you have to kind of push it in to get it to pop out. Once we do that, we have about 7 screws on the back. These are all Torx 5 and very consistent design with HTC. They tend to use the same screws most of the time. So we'll go ahead and take these out, set them aside. They are interchangeable, so you shouldn't have to worry about mixing them up. If you do, it's not really a big deal. And what's interesting is the two that are towards the center of the battery compartment, they literally only twist about one time and they come out. It's really strange, but it seems like they would seat a lot deeper, but they're very shallow, at least the part that threads into the housing. So once you get all of your screws out here, what we're going to do is, I started to pry on this, and it's really not even probably necessary. You can actually grab the side of the case and pull it apart. So I started to go under here to pry it, and it doesn't take much at all to get this thing to separate. And once it does, it literally just lifts off. There's not much holding it together. You can see I just kind of grab it here and start pulling it up. There might be a clip or two around the edges, but that actually kind of slides upwards off of the top of the phone and releases. And then you've got a second plate underneath here. And what we're going to do first of all, your charging port is actually modular, so it takes one screw inside here and you can literally replace the charging port on your Incredible 3 if it happens to break. It will be necessary to remove that screw also in order to remove the logic board from the mid frame. So in just a second here, you'll see I can actually lift this other plastic piece off. So it's a 2-piece plastic back, and then we have a retaining clip that covers the charging port, this little metal piece, and we're going to kind of pull this tape off that is holding the FFC gate closed and just kind of set that aside. We'll want to put that on later on when we put the phone back together. I like to keep them right somewhere where you can't really miss them, so when you put it back together you will not forget to plug that back in. This is going to pry open from the center of the phone straight up, and you can just slide that out. And here we have our modular charging port. Very good design. They've done that on the Incredible 2 and 3. First one not so easy. You actually had to solder that one in. We're going to release the electric motor here for the vibrator from the housing because it's going to come out with the logic board. And from that point, we should be able to lift this and just kind of fold it over. You'll see that the LCD and digitizer are plugged into the back of the logic board. So again, we'll have this tape that we want to move out of the way. Once we do that, we can open up the gates and we'll be able to release the cables from the side. And once you slide those out, what we want to do is take our replacement screen, and I'm going to go ahead and just fold these flex cables into the approximate position that they're going to be in when the phone is reassembled. And we want to plug everything into the logic board and make sure the LCD lights up and it's going to work properly, touchscreen is functioning before we do the full install. Once you glue these things in, a lot of times you can damage them taking them out. So if there's any trouble with your replacement part, you want to make sure that it hasn't been fully installed into the phone. It's very rare, but on occasion you'll get a bad one, and you want to make sure that you have not done any damage to it when you remove it from the phone. Once they're installed, they generally void the warranty on your replacement parts. So what you can do is kind of plug this in, again, very similar to the orientation that they had when the phone's fully assembled, but you can kind of do it without putting it all the way together. Unfortunately, the battery that was with this phone was completely discharged, so I was going to hold that up to the back of the board right where the terminals are in order to test the LCD, but with zero charge on the battery, obviously that's not going to work. So but you can see how you can kind of piece it together, make sure that the terminals line up, and kind of hold that in position while you hit the power button. If you do so with a charged battery, you'll be able to turn on the screen and test it. In this case I wasn't, so we're going to go ahead and take our universal battery here and plug it up in just a second. And I can tell that the battery's dead because the buzzer never turns on and it is definitely supposed to when you hit the power button. So what we'll do is we'll take our test leads here that are attached to a battery, and the negative terminal is going to be furthest towards the center of the phone. The positive terminal will be on the outside right hand edge from where you're looking. So we'll go ahead and attach our leads here. And once we do that, just very carefully flip everything over, hit the power button, and we should be able to test our screen at this point. So you can see here that we do have a good LCD. We want to go ahead and let that turn on and slide to unlock it here in a minute. And unfortunately, this phone actually has a lock pattern on it, so we won't be able to fully test the functionality, but we can tell it does look like it's picking up the digitizer's working, LCD's functioning. So I'm happy at this point that this is going to be okay. So we'll go ahead and power it down, disconnect the screen, and then go ahead and proceed with our install. On the back side of the front housing of the phone, you'll notice that there are 3 little rubber pieces that kind of fit around the plastic strips that go underneath between the lens and LCD. And what these do is they allow the buttons on the front to light up, the ones that are at the bottom of the screen. So you want to remove these little rubber pieces, and then basically you're going to have to salvage these plastic pieces. They don't come with the replacement screen. So what I'm going to do first of all is just pull this tape away from the LCD. They put some pretty heavy-duty adhesive on the other side of this, but a little bit of heat and a lot of patience and a good pry tool, you can usually get this off without making a complete mess. However, in this case, this phone was pretty badly cracked, so we're going to get a lot of glass laying around all over the place here in a minute. So we'll go ahead and tape that up shortly. But you'll see that I'm applying heat all the way around the edges. The majority of the adhesive is on the sides near the outer edge of the phone. And as I started to pry under here, you could see it almost will let you get underneath the glass. So theoretically, there may be a way to pull the glass off of this without damaging the LCD. I'm not going to try it. I've never been satisfied with the results of just replacing the glass. The phones never seem to work exactly like they did when they were new. So you don't want to put your name on something like that if you have customers. If you want to do it on your own, you can take a shot. But I recommend you just buy the full assembly lens digitizer and LCD. The whole thing's going to run you about $50. It'll save you a lot of time, and you'll have a brand new screen, not something that was glued back together or has a bunch of adhesive around the sides that can possibly over time start to separate. So I'm just putting some strapping tape on here. This will keep the majority of the glass on the screen. Still going to be a little bit messy, but this will help kind of hold things in one place. And now we'll proceed to kind of pry a little bit here. I started working at the top on this one, and because of the damage, I prefer to pry this from the top down, but I really couldn't get under the glass. It's just kind of falling apart at this point. So I initially took another tool and went under the back housing. You can see you can actually get between the frame and the LCD. But what happens is it tends to get kind of gummed up because of all the adhesive on the inside. So I was really just trying to twist this a little bit so I can separate the LCD enough that I can get down in the side here and just pry the whole thing out at once, which is what's going to happen here shortly. So you can see there I'm getting under just the glass. I really want to get behind the LCD itself. But again, just to demonstrate, you could possibly get the glass off this thing by itself, but getting the flex cable out from behind the LCD without breaking it, that is another challenge altogether. So again, if you get the whole piece, your life's going to be a lot easier. And time is of value to most people, so you don't want to waste too much time trying to get these things off. And once we get under this deep enough, you can see I've actually switched over to a softer pry tool now that I've opened it up a little bit, working my way around the edges. Went ahead and broke the glass at the top. I'm not worried about the flex cable. This is all going to be replaced anyway, so we can just kind of slowly open this up, and you'll see the adhesive strips are on the sides. That's the majority of what holds this thing in place. What I'm going to do is clean up this upper edge. There's a lot of glass on the inside. Make sure we get everything nice and smooth, and these plastic pieces at the bottom, we'll have to remove those and transfer them over to the same spot on the replacement piece, because you will need those pieces of plastic, otherwise the buttons on the front of your phone are not going to light up. So I'll go ahead and clean this up, and what I'm going to do here is come back with my prepared lens where I've got my adhesive strips set up. I'm going to use the I'm going to reuse the adhesive that was inside of the phone. You can see I put the buttons back on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and reuse that adhesive that's inside the frame, but I'm also going to add a little bit of adhesive at the top and the bottom. And then we've got these little rubber pieces that once we get it installed will actually cover those little light diffusers or whatever you want to call them. Okay, so we've got our flex cables positioned in the same way that they were on the old phone, or on the from the old LCD, and you want to be absolutely certain you get these little plastic tabs to go through the proper channels at the bottom before you push anything on there. It is absolutely crucial that those go into the right spot. So once we know they're lined up correctly, I'll go ahead and peel off the second piece of wax paper from my adhesives, and then we will be ready to install this. So I would recommend you route the cables first, go next to the buttons, make sure they line up properly, and once everything is set into position, you should be okay to go ahead and press this all down into place around the edges. Again, make sure you don't trap any flex cables in the process. That can be kind of tricky to get those back out once you glue it in. And then down at the bottom, there's really only one position that these rubber pieces will go in and set flush. So when I started to put these in, I actually had them in backwards, and you'll see shortly they don't really sit right. They kind of stick out. Once you put them in, and if you run into that, just flip them over. Basically, it's kind of an L shape that goes into the housing. And then you'll have a nice flush surface after these are installed in the proper position.
You realize that on Mondays you're going to start working with huge truck.
So here you can see I've actually flipped it around. I did indeed have this thing, the little plastic rubber piece, upside down the first time. So again, you will notice if it's upside down, you'll see a big hole sticking up, kind of protruding from the back of the housing. If that's the case, flip it over. These will set down nice and straight. You might have to tuck them in a little bit with a small tool of some sort. I'm using the tweezers here. But when you finish, you should have a nice, smooth surface facing you.
I saw someone, or I heard someone playing that, and I'm like, hey, Robert.
So I think Josh got the job.
I haven't heard anything. I would assume.
Is it yes?
Yes.
Hmm.
That's what I said. Wait, I showed you that GIF of Breaking Bad, right?
So once we've got those into position, we can now plug in our flex cables. This part can be a little bit tricky, so it just kind of takes practice. It's a bit awkward, but you've got to get this thing inserted all the way clamp the gate down, put the tape on, and then move on to the other cable, which is on the same side. I like to use the tweezers very carefully just to kind of push it on the sides. Don't poke these things or cut them. They are very sensitive, and if you damage them, you will have to buy another screen. But just guide these into the proper channel there under the FSC, and then you can actually close that down, and that'll kind of clamp.
Got to admit, it's brilliant.
We'll then put the tape back on, and that will.
Oh man, I was craving one of those
that
shakes
they do not
yesterday.
open up unexpectedly.
I was like, hey, I go, oh Jennifer, have you ever had these Vietnamese shakes and everything? Oh, I don't like none of that tapioca and everything. You don't have to get it with tapioca. Oh, you don't? No. In fact, most people don't even like that stuff. They just get the shake.
I knew when people say that, they're like,
And we
yeah,
can just kind of flip the board over on top of it, and it may feel a little bit spongy at the top. You kind of
Yeah,
expect
that'll
these
work.
things to lock into place, but on this one,
Genius.
it's actually the screws that hold everything together. So if you have a little bit of movement, you shouldn't have to worry too much. If it feels like there's something stuck in there, obviously make sure you get it out. Here, we'll go ahead and put the charging port back in. Close that gate down, and don't forget to put your tape back on. And the motor goes back into the housing. We'll put the retaining clip over the charging port,
Hey, what's up?
and you can go ahead and put that screw in right away that holds this one in place.
1 second.
And from here we have the two plastic pieces that go on the back. I'm only going to do a partial reassembly here. I'll put the plastic pieces back on and a couple of screws just so that we can test this and make sure everything is working properly. Remember, the top kind of tucks in a very interesting position on the top. The speaker mesh goes towards the front of the phone, so you're going to have to kind of manipulate this a little bit. Take a look at the video. You can see how this is going together. It's like most HTCs, the top end of the screen tucks into the frame, and then everything else falls into place. So you might have to mess around with it a little bit until you get a comfortable feeling, but I assure you it will go in back the way it was originally. Put a couple screws in here. We'll attach the battery and make sure that everything is working properly before we put all of the screws back into the phone. And we're going to fire this up, make sure everything turns on, and if that's the case, we can probably remember that we have a dead battery here, so we're going to have to take the battery out and put that on a charger before anything works. But when we get done, the finished product is going to be a fully functioning repaired phone. If you guys found this video useful, please hit the like button. Feel free to share this with your friends, post it on Facebook, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter. Put any comments down in the section below. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them whenever possible. If you want more information about cell phone repair, visit me at gocellphonerepair.com. Thanks for watching.